Hi everyone, welcome to the second live stream. I'm Heavenly Fan, my name is Fan, and I just need to do a quick sound check. Make sure you can hear me because I'm using a different microphone today. Hopefully the audio is a little bit better than last time. So give me a little wave if you can hear me and see me well. Well, first of all, thank you for joining me. And today I'm going to share with you one of the most, probably one of the most important piece of content that I came across throughout my keto journey. So this is an interview conducted by Highintensityhealth. It's a great channel for fitness and intermittent fasting and keto way of eating. So definitely go to check them out. This is a great interview conducted by the channel with Dr. Jason Fung. This interview with Dr. Jason Fung is one of the two similar sort of interviews of along a similar line. Audio great. Thank you so much. Thank you for that confirmation. And so we're going to go through this interview. This interview is about an hour long, reasonable length, but every single bit is packed with a lot of information. So the talk is focusing on fasting, intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting from his point of view as a doctor. But the topics that covers throughout is applicable to everyone, whether you're contemplating on doing fasting or whether you're interested or not. There's so many things, and there are a lot of sort of points that he sort of managed to clarify. They will help you along your journey, because I know it covers a lot of topics that you have been asking me about throughout the years. And, I do my best to explain it in layman's terms, but Dr. Jason Fung is a doctor. He's, if you're not familiar with him, he is a kidney doctor. I think he's based in Canada. He treats patients mostly with severe weight issues, obesity related sort of problems. So diabetics and, just excess weight. And he's using his principles, sort of keto principles, and incorporating with intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting to help these patients. And he's seeing amazing results. So some of you might be familiar with him already, but I don't know how many of you have actually seen this interview. And so we're going to watch it together, and I'll share my thoughts with you along the lines, and I'll look into your comments to share your thoughts. I know there are a lot of really knowledgeable and a lot more knowledgeable than me in the sort of health and medical field. So please feel free to chime in and let's have a discussion about it. We're all learning, and there will be terminologies that's maybe not very accessible, and we will try to break it down and put it in layman's terms. The goal is to learn new information with an open mind, and hopefully we can come out of this session knowing more and having more equipped to move forward on this journey. So I'm going to just quickly say hello to everybody. Thank you very much. So Simrata, I can't pronounce it. Forgive me. Impressed with him in the past. Yes, I know many of you are sort of aware of Dr. Jason Fung. He also has a YouTube channel, and he's got the ability to put pretty intimidating kind of medical information into really plain terms and in sort of playful way as well. So that works for me, and I hope it works for you. So let's come through with open mind. But before we do that, I just want to share a piece of news with you. So I only come across this last night, probably because I've been sort of looking into sort of keto, intermittent fasting type of information, that this news just popped up. So let me just quickly share with you. Let's have a look. Let me know if you can see this. Okay, so this is Michael Mosley. For those of you who are outside the UK who may or may not know him, he's a TV doctor, essentially, maybe similar to Dr. Oz. I don't want to, make any comparison. But he's known for intermittent fasting, kind of bringing the concept of intermittent fasting to the UK masses. And this just popped up that he's been missing for, I think today, for 4 days. And it's quite worrying. I think what happened was he and his family, his wife and kids, went to Greece, a sort of Greek island. Simi, I think I'm not familiar with islands. It's a small island, Greek island. And he went for a walk with his wife and a couple, 2 friends. And then he decided to walk back to his accommodation, which is a town center. And he basically disappeared from then on. So the search has been going on for a few days. I mean, he's very known for, he coined the term of, I think it's 2-5 or 5-2 diet, which is eating for 5 days and 2 days fasting. And I think he went in essentially as an experiment, and he sort of enjoyed tremendous benefit. And from then on, he's been on everywhere. He's written books, he's on daytime TV on a regular basis, basically promoting the idea of intermittent fasting and also a low carb way of eating. Not keto per se, but basically reducing carbohydrate and sugar. So he's quite an influential figure in this term, at least in the UK. So he's been missing for 4 days, and for some reason he doesn't have a mobile phone with him. So it's quite worrying. And but it's been spotted this is on his Facebook, but he's been spotted on CCTV last time when he managed to get back to the town center, because initially there are some thoughts that maybe during the walk back to his accommodation, something happened, accident, or maybe he fallen in the sea, because it's very hot in the past few days. Apparently it's over 40 degrees Celsius. So for most people, particularly people from the UK, that's tremendous heat, even for local people. So we don't know what the situation is. He made it back to the town center. He's been spotted, but the CCTV is not sort of covered wide enough to capture where he's gone. There's some suspicion he's gone up to a pass that's quite remote, even for local people. So I want to bring this up because he's quite an important figure in the UK when it comes to intermittent fasting and low carb way of eating, and all prayers, and hope for the best. So they're going to find him safe and well. So I just want to bring that up. So with that, let's come back to this interview. So for those of you who just joined me, so this is an interview conducted with a channel called Intensity Health. Let me double check. I should know because I discovered this channel for ages ago. It's called Highintensityhealth. And please go have a check. If you want to watch this video uninterrupted with no commentary, I've got a link underneath the description. So my gratitude to the channel for conducting this wonderful interview. So now we're going to go into the video. So that intro bit, it covered already several topics. I think some of you will be very interested. And let me just have a look at it, double checking. So all the audio's working. Very, very happy. Okay, so let's go.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode. It's Mike Mutzel here with Highintensityhealth.com. Very excited to be with Dr. Jason Fung to talk about his latest book, The Complete Guide to Fasting. And also, if you may remember, he wrote the Obesity Code. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But Dr. Fung, first of all, I want to welcome you to High Intensity Health Radio.
Thank you.
And commend you for your work and really encouraging people to learn more about fasting. And although it seems like a novel idea, humans have been doing this for quite a while.
Let me turn on.
That's right. Well, really, they've been doing it since the dawn of humanity, and that's the whole point, is that what we have here is a therapeutic modality that's been used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and now, for some reason, we all have decided that this is like the worst thing that people have ever done in their life, right? And it's like, that's ridiculous. And if you even look back at all the religions, they all have prescribed periods of fasting, right? Some religions more than others, but people have always done it. In certain cultures, like the ancient Greeks, they did it for different reasons. For them, they did it for the mental clarity. But there was a long, long tradition with fasting. In the last 50 years or so, there's been this real move against it. Now, for example, you mention it and people just roll their eyes. They think it's like the dumbest thing they've ever heard. I'm like, well, what's so dumb about it, right? And that was the point I was at a few years ago when I was working with type 2 diabetics. So I'm a kidney specialist, and we see a lot of type 2 diabetics, and many of them are overweight. What you realize is that you have to take care of that diabetes, otherwise they're going to progress to have kidney disease, and to take care of the diabetes, they have to lose weight. So somehow we got to the point where we were discussing fasting. I thought, oh, that's the dumbest idea ever, right? Yeah. And then I thought, well, why is it so dumb? Like, what's wrong with it, right? So then I started to look, and really there's nothing wrong with it. There's all these benefits, but the bottom line for me was that it's a way that people lose weight. And people have always used it to lose weight, right? And it doesn't mean you have to fast for 40 days and 40 nights. It just means that you have to extend the time, let your body burn off some of the fat, and there's nothing wrong with that. So as I started to look into the physiology and so on, then I realized that there was actually all this important benefits that were going on with the fasting, and that there was no reason why we didn't use it. So that's why we started to use it for all our patients.
Yeah. And did you notice blood sugar regulation improved commensurate with the weight loss, or was that after the fact? Like, because you're working with diabetics.
Type 2 diabetes, the blood sugar often gets better before a lot of the weight is lost. So you can often pull people off of their medications, take them off of their insulin and so on. And that's one of the things that you have to be careful about, is that you don't take the same dose of all your medications, especially if they're diabetic medications, and change your diet at the same time. Because, of course, there's a risk that your sugars go too low. And luckily, I'm able to monitor that and advise patients and that sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely. Blood sugar comes down. It's not really that hard to understand. You don't eat, your blood sugar comes down, right? So nothing hard about it.
Yeah. And in these diabetic patients, do they have a trouble with doing this fasting protocol? Are they getting it?
So before it goes into the next question, I just want to point out how simple Dr. Jason Fung has made it to be. So we very often associate with the idea of not eating to starvation. And what he's pointing out is a really important point. Human has been doing it for the longest time. A lot of modern concept of a lot of things that we actually have been doing for a long time, we perceive as something that's detrimental and dangerous. And there's so many examples. So I just want to point it out. Already, he's kind of just go demystify the whole concept.
Getting into ketosis, is that what we're saying? Patients, do they
eat, your blood sugar comes down, right? So nothing hard about it.
Yeah. And in these diabetic patients, do they have a trouble with doing this fasting protocol? Are they getting into ketosis? Is that what we're saying? Or are they...
I don't measure ketones, so I don't actually know if they're going into ketosis. Certainly some are going into ketosis, but I couldn't tell you because we don't measure it. We don't have a good system. I mean, there's systems for it, but it's not absolutely.
So I have to stop for just pause for a little bit before we move on. This is the point. When I first saw this video, probably about 5-6 years ago, I was in the very beginning of my keto journey, and I wasn't particularly looking for sort of fasting information, but I came across this interview, and what he said about ketosis, the ketone level he just mentioned, we're going to wind back and listen to that again, because I think it's so important. For me, that was a light bulb moment, because till that point, if you have sort of seen my previous video or the last live stream, I talked about the measuring of the ketone level. And that's the question I've been asked so frequently in terms of, how do you know if you're in ketosis and how do you check? And in the past, I had tried Atkins. So back in those times, it was a little bit ago, and you use a test strip to test for it. But the process is very intrusive and not something that you're looking forward to do. So when I looked into sort of low carb way of eating, in a process triggering, sort of go for the body to go into some form of ketosis, I was dreading the element of checking the ketone. I didn't enjoy that aspect of it. But just by that single statement, I suddenly go, well, hang on a second. This is a living, breathing, real doctor treating patients. He's got a clinic, Dr. Jason Fung's got a clinic in Canada, treating patients with a lot more severe weight issues every single day. And here he is saying, well, there's no need to check. And, we don't do that. And you'll find out why that is, because, this is evidence-based. He's looking at these patients all the time. And he knows that the most important thing is the outcome and not the numbers. So I wanted to point that out because I remember the light bulb just went off when I first saw this the first time, the kind of, epiphany. Let me just wind back a little bit.
Are they getting into? Yeah,
It's not really that hard to understand. You don't eat, your blood sugar comes down, right? So nothing hard about it.
Yeah, and in these diabetic patients, do they have a trouble with doing this fasting protocol? Are they getting into ketosis? Is that what we're saying, or are they?
I don't measure ketones, so
Okay.
I don't actually know if they're going into ketosis.
Yeah.
Certainly, some are going into ketosis, but I couldn't tell you because we don't measure it. We don't have a good system. I mean, there's systems for it, but it's not absolutely necessary either. So to simplify things, we actually don't require it of our patients. Many people like to see it to know if they're burning fat and so on, and if it helps them, great. But for many of our patients, they're older, they don't really want to do something extra. So
yeah. What about hypoglycemia?
Yeah, I mean, that's the major risk, right? So if you're taking blood sugar medications, then you may go hypoglycemic, right? The question is if you're not taking medication, so for somebody who's either not diabetic or diabetic but not taking medications, there's always this worry, oh, you're going to hypoglycemic. Well, no, that's not how the world works, right? And this is the same thing. So and people always tell you these crazy, crazy things about fasting. One of them is you'll go hypoglycemic and like die or something, right? So it's like, okay, if that was true, then 100, 200 years ago, and it was winter and you're living in a cave somewhere and there's no food, you don't eat for a couple days, well, you go hypoglycemic and die, right? That's what happens to all the lions and the tigers and the bears. They all just have seizures and die, right? No, it's like, come on, that's just ridiculous, right? If you actually measure the blood sugar of people who fast, it typically goes down a bit, then stays in that normal range. And every single study has shown the same thing. The reason is your body will produce some of the sugar. The other thing it will do, of course, is reduce the need for sugar. So your body, most of your muscles, for example, will start burning fat. Your brain, which cannot.
So quick pause here. So he's explained the myth, really, that if you stop taking in glucose, you're going to go into hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar in the plain layman's term. So He's saying it's a miss because it doesn't mean your blood sugar just keep going low and low and you perish. It doesn't work like that. Basically, your body will find a way to find a balance point, and because your body is intelligent, so that's busting that sort of fear a lot of people have with fasting, meaning that you're going to just continue to kind of disintegrate into nothing. So listen to this.
The body then stays in years and
Let me
days.
rewind a little
You're
bit.
living in a cave somewhere and there's no food, you don't eat for a couple days, well, you go hypoglycemic and die, right? That's what happens to all the lions and the tigers and the bears. They all just have seizures and die, right? No, it's like, come on, that's just ridiculous, right? If you actually measure the blood sugar of people who fast, it typically goes down a bit, then stays in that normal range. And every single study has shown the same thing. The reason is your body will produce some of the sugar. The other thing it will do, of course, is reduce the need for sugar. So your body, most of your muscles, for example, will start burning fat. Your brain, which cannot, the body produces ketone bodies, and the ketone bodies will provide most of the energy needed for the brain. So you do need a little bit of glucose, but luckily you can get that from your body fat as well. So if you look at glycerol, which is the backbone of the fat molecule, so it's a glycerol plus 3 fatty acid chain. When you don't eat, your body cuts off those 3 fatty acids, the muscles use the fatty acids, the glycerol gets turned into glucose, and you have a little bit of glucose. But since most of your body is not using glucose, you don't really need that much.
Right.
So that's the point. You don't go hypoglycemic, right? It's the same thing. You hear this all the time, that the brain needs 130 grams of carbohydrates every day, so that therefore you must eat every single day, otherwise you're going to die. Right? And it's like, okay, that is just the most ridiculous thing ever. That anybody would ever think that honestly boggles my mind, because this is basic physiology, right? Not even like Physiology 101. This is like high school physiology, right? Like not even like grade 12. It's like grade 9 physiology. It's like, the thing is that if you don't eat, what happens is that your body breaks down glycogen, provides glucose. So why do you need to eat? You don't. When you eat, you store energy. When you don't eat, your body pulls that energy back out. So for example, we ask people to fast all the time. If you're going for surgery, you don't eat. If you're going for a colonoscopy, you don't eat. If you're going for fasting blood work, you don't eat. If you're going for an ultrasound, you don't eat. Sometimes it's 18 hours, sometimes it's 20 hours. It depends on what the procedure is. So people fast all the time.
So from that description, from that description of not eating, that is essentially the process, how people go into ketosis. So I'm frequently asked, well, how long does it take into ketosis and how do you know? Is that once your body is depleted with glucose, your body doesn't just give up and go, that's it. For a little while, it will fight you. You'll try to urge you to replenish more glucose. And that's what a body does, because that's the fuel source for your body for the longest time, particularly if it's the first time you go on keto. But what happens is, once that's depleted, your body doesn't just give up. It will try to switch fuel. And that's when your body starts to produce ketone and through the body fat. And Dr. Fung just mentioned that when wild animals, when they go out, when they're starving, they're going out to hunt. That's a really important point as well, because when body's under stress, to a certain extent, if your body's depleted with glucose, you are, in a way, you're putting your body into a certain level, a certain form of stress. But what happens if people have been on keto or have been have gone through the experience of fasting? What they report back is that you have that mental clarity and sharpness you don't normally experience when you're on high carbohydrate diet. On the contrary, very often I call it carbohydrate coma. A lot of times if you eat a large plate of pasta or a big sandwich, you feel sluggish. So there's a problem there, because food is supposed to give you nutrient and energy. There's no reason when you eat something you actually feel worse. But when you're fasting, technically your body is deprived with nutrient, but you're feeling sharper. And that's how our body is designed, is intelligent in order for us to survive, because there's no way our body just give up. If we're starving and our body just disintegrate and we become weaker and weaker, human being probably wouldn't be here after this time. We're just distinct because we just starve to bits. And so what happens when our body's under certain stress, even though this is artificial, this is controlled stress, your body kicks into a gear and actually go, well, no, you really need to focus. You're going to have more energy and more concentration in order to find food. So that's where, this paradox happens very often, that people feel that if you don't have food, you will become weak and then suffering from all sorts of things. So this is a really, really sort of critical point that we need to understand our body's intelligence. And what happens when we go to ketosis or intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting, your body has the mechanism to find the balance, and through the process provides many benefits.
Does any one of them ever go? If you're going for a colonoscopy, you don't eat. If you're going for fasting blood work, you don't eat. If you're going for an ultrasound, you don't eat. Sometimes it's 18 hours, sometimes it's 20 hours. It depends on what the procedure is. Yeah. So people fast all the time. Does any one of them ever go hypoglycemic or have a seizure, or there's no brain functions, they've turned into like slobbering idiots? No, they feel pretty normal.
Pretty good, actually, mostly,
pretty
right?
good, yeah. Almost every single one of them. Yeah. Yet you'll hear some idiot writing somewhere that, the brain needs 130 grams of carbohydrates to function. You must eat that amount every single day, each and every day of your adult life. Otherwise, you will become a slobbering idiot. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my God. It's like, you can't be more idiotic if you try, right? Because the basic physiology has been worked out 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows it's false. So, but this is the thing,
Not
right?
Everybody.
There's these truths that get passed on, and they get repeated so often that no matter how stupid they are, people believe them because they've been repeated over and over. It's like the calories thing, right? Oh, cut your calories, you'll lose weight. Has it worked for anybody, right? No, not really. I don't think it's ever worked, right? The studies have proved it, right? So it's like, why do we think that cutting calories will make you lose weight? Because everybody says so. That's the only reason. Is there any randomized trial? No, right? So there's so many examples here where people going to repeat this. And fasting has more than the usual number of things: starvation mode, muscle loss. There's so many of these myths that go around. But definitely hypoglycemia is not one of the big concerns unless you're taking medications. Then you have to be careful. Yes.
And so in which case you would work with a practitioner, obviously, to make sure that we're okay. You mentioned muscle loss. I think that's a big hurdle or mental hurdle for a lot of people, because people are interested in like fine-tuning their health are generally active. They're exercising, doing CrossFit, weightlifting. We know that muscle's anti-aging. It's where insulin stores onto and so forth. You have a great argument as to why it's so silly to think that you would lose all this muscle when you do intermittent fasting.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Again, people who have a little bit of knowledge sometimes extrapolate, and it's not really warranted. So there's differences in terms of what happens. So as you fast, you will start with the glycogen. So your liver, so glycogen is change of glucose. So as you eat, you fill up your glycogen stores, and these are all chains of glucose. And that lasts anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, right? So if you don't eat for 24 hours, for the most part, you have enough glucose in your liver. You simply break all the glycogen back into little chains of sugar and send it back out. So you're not burning muscle, and everybody kind of knows that. At the other extreme, if you're fasting for more than about 36 hours or so, you're burning mostly fat. But there's a window in there where you do this so-called gluconeogenesis, where you use protein to kind of produce glucose.
Okay, I'm going to just quickly pause here because you mentioned a really key word, just now, neogenesis, and also just a little bit before this. So muscle loss is one of the probably biggest myths when it comes to being ketogenic, and also let me just bring this up. It's one of the myths that people think you're going to lose muscles, because particularly when you first go into ketosis, you actually feel the energy level will drop a little bit because your body is still trying to figure out what is going on. Where's the glucose? So if you're used to, if you normally go out jogging or going to the gym, you will feel a level of energy drop. And that's totally expected and normal. If you know it's expected, you're not going to panic. But muscle loss is another thing that it's to do with what we were talking about, that if you deprive your body with nutrient, going to some sort of intermittent fasting or fasting, the body is going to just break down. And what the doctor is saying here, it's absolutely, there's no evidence is that's the case. And not only so, when your body is depleted of energy, it doesn't just go into starvation mode. And this is one of the biggest thing that they need to address. And I think that what doctor wasn't very accurate about, or not really true, in terms of what he said everybody knows that. No, not everybody. Most people believe that if you sort of eat less, if you don't eat carbohydrate, or if you go into some sort of intermittent fasting, the muscle will go. And he's going to explain to you why it's not true.
And it's not really warranted. So there's differences in terms of what happens. So as you fast, you will start with the glycogen. So your liver, so glycogen is change of glucose. So as you eat, you fill up your glycogen stores. And these are all chains of glucose. And that lasts anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, right? So if you don't eat for 24 hours, for the most part, you have enough glucose in your liver. You simply break all the glycogen back into little chains of sugar and send it back out. So you're not burning muscle, and everybody kind of knows that. At the other extreme, if you're fasting for more than about 36 hours or so, you're burning mostly fat. But there's a window in there where you do this so-called gluconeogenesis, where you use protein to kind of produce glucose. Mm-hmm. And that's where people say, wow, you're going to lose, and I've heard these numbers, you're going to lose a 1/4 pound of muscle for every day you fast. Again, you'd have to realize that if you believe that, then you'd have to believe that Mother Nature designed our bodies to store food energy as fat and sugar, but when we actually need it, to burn protein, right? It's like, okay, well, that sounds pretty dumb, right? No system would work very well if it was designed that way. If you had, it's like you store firewood for your wood burning oven, but as soon as you need it, you chop up your sofa and throw it into the fire. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you think that? Why would you be so stupid, right? Why do you think our body is so stupid that it does that? If you're going to store energy as sugar and fat, you're going to burn sugar and fat, right? Mm-hmm. There is a portion in there where you're using some protein. So again, if you look at extended fasting, what you see is that there is a turnover every day of protein. And the protein gets turned into the glucose, but you don't ramp up that protein. It's not like you're increasing the burning of your protein. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, if you have repeated, let's assume, for example, that's true, that you lose a 1/4 pound of muscle for every day you fast. So that means in a year, I should lose, I do maybe 3 days a week, perhaps, right? So say in a couple of years, I should lose all my muscle, right? I should be like 100% fat, right? Yeah. But I'm not. I've got bone, right? I've got skin, right? It's not like I burned off all my skin and turned it into a giant glob of fat that's just sitting here, right? It's like, come on, that's just the most ridiculous argument I've ever.
I laugh every time. It doesn't matter how many times I watch this bit. It makes me laugh. So this is kind of busted the myth right there. So if we believe, let me just come back. If we believe that muscle loss is true when we fast, or when we're not taking huge amount of protein, then what happens is it will start depleting. And I have to say, this is a second light bulb moment when I first watched this, because so he used the analogy of burning the sofa. And in my mind, I always kind of comparing to bank accounts. So if the food that we take in, whatever it is, the energy source is the ready money, is the cash. And our body fat, in a way, is the saving account. So the common belief is that if the ready money runs out, the cash runs out, we just declare bankruptcy. We're just stuck. It makes zero sense, because why would you do that when you have the saving account, which is the fat? And this is, in fact, what's happening with the human body is when the glucose that comes in, the cash has run out, it switches to the bank account, the saving account, which is the fat, and use that as energy source. In my mind, that was kind of, the easiest way to understand the process. And so if the common belief is true, I'm such a visual person. So every time he says the blob of fat, it makes me laugh, because I can literally see a person just consist of fat. And so if the common belief is true, essentially, if you keep fasting and not taking carbohydrate, protein, or huge amount of protein, essentially we just reduce to fat, which is the saving account. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So I want to rewind this a little bit, because this is really, really pivotal in my thinking and my understanding of how human body works. And it's such a simple way to kind of explain
Intermittent
this.
fasting.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Again, people who have a little bit of knowledge sometimes extrapolate, and it's not really warranted. So there's differences in terms of what happens. So as you fast, you will start with the glycogen. So your liver, so glycogen is change of glucose. So as you eat, you fill up your glycogen stores, and these are all chains of glucose. And that lasts anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, right? So if you don't eat for 24 hours, for the most part, you have enough glucose in your liver. You simply break all the glycogen back into little chains of sugar and send it back out. So you're not burning muscle, and everybody kind of knows that. At the other extreme, if you're fasting for more than about 36 hours or so, you're burning mostly fat. But there's a window in there where you do this so-called gluconeogenesis, where you use protein to kind of produce glucose. And that's where people say, wow, you're going to lose, and I've heard these numbers, you're going to lose a quarter pound of muscle for every day you fast. Again, you'd have to realize that if you believe that, then you'd have to believe that Mother Nature designed our bodies to store food energy as fat and sugar, but when we actually need it, to burn protein. Right? It's like, okay, well, that sounds pretty dumb, right? No system would work very well if it was designed that way. If you had, it's like you store firewood for your wood burning oven, but as soon as you need it, you chop up your sofa and throw it into the fire. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you think that? Why would you be so stupid, right? Why do you think our body is so stupid that it does that? If you're going to store energy as sugar and fat, you're going to burn sugar and fat, right? There is a portion in there where you're using some protein. So again, if you look at extended fasting, what you see is that there is a turnover every day of protein. And the protein gets turned into the glucose, but you don't ramp up that protein. It's not like you're increasing the burning of your protein. So if you think about it, if you have repeated, let's assume, for example, that's true, that you lose a quarter pound of muscle for every day you fast. So that means in a year, I should lose, let's see, I do maybe 3 days a week, perhaps, right? So, so say in a couple of years, I should lose all my muscle, right? I should be like 100% fat, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not. I've got bone, right? I've got skin, right? It's not like I burned off all my skin and turned it into a giant glob of fat that's just sitting here, right? It's like, come on, that's just the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back to studies of fasting, so it's like, if you think you're going to lose muscle while fasting, then do the study. Fast people measure their muscle mass.
Yeah.
At the end of it, don't look at urea kinetics and all this stuff, because that's not your question. I didn't ask you about urea kinetics. So urea is the breakdown product of protein.
Mm-hmm.
Do the study where you take somebody, you fast, measure their muscle mass. Is it changed? And it's like, when you compare them, no, there's not much change.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it depends. Again, if you are very obese versus if you're very lean, then it's different too. Okay? So a very obese person will burn much more fat percentage-wise than a lean person.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Again, the body's just not that stupid, right? So the estimates is an obese person will burn about 90% of their calories as fat, whereas the lean person is down at 78. So they are burning more protein.
Interesting.
So absolutely. And this is why, because there's just a lot more fat than the fat person, right? So you're going to burn that.
Right.
That's just smart, right? So this is the thing. If you're worried about that, you do the study. So recently there was a study where they compared caloric restriction to alternate daily fasting. So you got to remember that anytime you lose weight, your lean mass also goes down, right? So it's not like pure fat that you're losing. So you can't take your baseline as zero lean body mass loss, right? And this is the mistake everybody always makes. Again, they say, wow, you're losing lean mass. Well, you lose lean mass anyway, right? Which one is worse?
Mm-hmm.
So they compared the lean mass loss in a fasting regimen versus a daily caloric restriction. And so if you look at the lean mass percentage, so after, I think, 32 weeks, so about 6 months, they measured it. And the lean mass percentage went up because you're losing more fat than lean mass in the caloric restriction by 0.5% and 2.2% in the alternate daily fasting. So in other words, the fasting group was 4 times better at preserving lean mass compared to caloric restriction. In other words, it's way better.
More efficient, yeah.
Way better, right? Yeah. And the reasons are simple, right? It increases growth hormone, it increases noradrenaline. Those are so-called counter-regulatory hormones. Counter-regulatory hormones are so named because they counter the effect of insulin. So insulin lowers your blood glucose. When you're fasting, you want to pull that sugar back out, so raise blood glucose. So that's what they do. So growth hormone, noradrenaline. So what the noradrenaline does is, of course, give you more energy and keeps your metabolic rate high. And the human growth hormone means that when you start eating again, you will lay down lean mass, right? Wow. So your body's not that stupid, right? It knows that you're going to have periods of starvation or fasting, right? Fasting is basically the controlled version. But in the caveman days, it was starvation. You had nothing to eat for 7 days. It's there's no rabbits around, right? So you can't eat anything, and your body knows that. So what it does is it's evolved this mechanism where you're not going to lose all your lean muscle, because you can't. If you did, you'd be dead, right? After 5 days, you burn all your muscle and you've gained all this fat, right? Now you've just got fat, right? And it's like all these Native Indians and Native Americans and Kalahari Bush people and the Aboriginals, they have these repeated feast-famine cycles, so they should be like little balls of 100% fat, right? Every single one of them, right? It's like, that doesn't happen, right? So this is, again, another myth that gets perpetuated because everybody wants you to not fast. There's no money in it, right? There's no money in it for anybody. Nobody wants to promote it. Nobody wants to be a champion for it, because it's just like, hey, how am I going to make money if I promote it, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense for most people.
Really interesting. And going back to the evolutionary aspect of it, the people that couldn't do this, the people that couldn't preserve lean muscle mass and burn glycogen and then fat over time, their genes probably are not here because they didn't make it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's another component.
And the other thing is that not all that protein is good, right? Everybody has this inherent bias that all that protein is really good stuff, right? Well, there's all kinds of situations where that protein is not.
Let me just say, protein is a big issue, and you're going to hear how doctor explain the concept. But for those of you who think that your body is going to run into trouble when you're not taking a huge amount of protein. So ketogenic diet is actually low carb, high fat, high good fat, and also moderate protein. It doesn't advocate huge amounts of protein. So he mentioned, doctor mentioned a really key word is gluconeogenesis. Trying to say that correctly. Gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis. Let me just show you this tab. So this is how it's spelled. So you don't need to worry about the sort of scientific bit, at least personally for me. But I think what it is your body, when it's the glucose depleted to a certain level, it actually convert certain parts of the protein into glucose, and also your body will produce some protein in order to support your, I think it's brain function, the doctor mentioned. So your body has a way to balance things out. It doesn't just break. And also earlier on, it was mentioning of the, back in those days when we hunt and gatherers, we couldn't just go out to the supermarket and just get food. We have to go out and hunt. And it doesn't make sense if you run into a low in ration and food and, basically your body just start burning the muscles and then gradually just turn into a blob of fat, according to Dr. Jason Fung. So it's really plain and simple if you think about it, that, a lot of times in a particularly modern way of sort of medical information that we have everywhere, we're taught not to trust our body. We're taught to think that if we don't do everything we can manually, the body is going to just run into so much trouble. But we're not sitting duck. We come this far as a species for a reason, and there are ways. The body always tries to heal the body and try to rectify whatever is not balanced, if we allow it. So this is a really important concept. So to a great extent, you need to have faith with your body. So, you allow certain things to take over.
Not good stuff, right? So, for example, in Alzheimer's disease,
now he's talking about protein.
Really good stuff, right? Well, exactly.
So that's another component.
And the other thing is that not all that protein is good, right? Everybody has this inherent bias that all that protein is really good stuff, right? Well, there's all kinds of situations where that protein is not good stuff, right? So, for example, in Alzheimer's disease, there's all this abnormal protein gumming up your brain, and that's why you can't think, right? Well, what if you had a process which could actually break down this junky old protein and get rid of it? Well, that's what fasting does. Because again, your body's like, oh, I'm not getting any nutrients here. Let me look for any of the junky old proteins that I don't need. Let me break them down. And that process is called autophagy. And it's been a super hot topic because the 2016 Nobel Prize in Medicine went to one of the pioneers of research in autophagy. It's super important because you can, theoretically, prevent all kinds of disease, cancers, for example, because all those cancerous cells, they need glucose, they're going to die, but also your body's going to target them, say, what the hell is this? Let's burn it for energy, right? All that flabby excess skin. I have never referred a patient to a plastic surgeon to take off that excess skin from weight loss. Why? Because your body can take care of that, right? Wow. And everybody says, oh, how can you know? How do you know? Well, think about it for a second. If you look at pictures of Holocaust survivors or American prisoners of war in Japan from World War II, They were big guys. They went and got starved for a long time. When you saw those pictures, did they have like flabby, loose skin everywhere?
No.
No, because your body says, I don't want that flabby, loose skin and I need energy. I'm burning that protein right now, right? So it takes it, burns it all down into energy, and that's it, because it's not necessary, right?
Wow.
And that's the thing, is that everybody thinks these excess proteins are good. I don't think they're all that good. I think that there's actually a lot of protein that could be gotten rid of. Like if you are obese, then it's a very good option for you, because you know for a fact that you're going to be burning more fat than protein. If you're very lean, it may not be the best option for you. If you're lean and you want to build muscle, these long fasts are probably not your best. Probably not your best idea.
So Doctor just mentioned the really sort of buzzword really is autophagy. So autophagy in the sort of layman terms, if you have been doing keto, intermittent fasting or any kind of fasting for a while, you probably come across autophagy. Someone somewhere will be talking about it. Kind of a magic term. All it is, or not saying all it is, but it's a probably complex process. But for someone like me who's a layman, how I understand it is basically when your body is deprived of nutrient, which is kind of fasting process, then at some point your body will kick into this gear that your body starts to use up wasted protein, which, from our cells, to, as a result, generates renewal of the body. It's a, if you think about it, it's a process that really makes sense, because our body makes cells all the time, and eventually the cells might age or something might be malfunctioning. So autophagy is the way for give your body an opportunity to tap into that and start kind of cleaning it up in a way, some housekeeping, in order for new cells to be regenerated, and also use up any waste protein that's in our body. So it reminds me, if you think about trees, I'm not a gardener, but with trees, in order to encourage trees or plants to grow, we trim them. We trim off the bits that maybe not looking so great, in order to encourage new leaves or branches to grow. And also, if you work in a company, for instance, and particularly large organizations, from time to time, they might come in and do a reshuffling, or asking certain people to remove certain people from the company, redundancy and stuff. It's not great on the micro level for individuals, but overall for a company to grow and to kind of do better. Sometimes it's important to remove certain job roles that maybe not serving the company anymore, and introducing new skills, new way of doing. And if you think about a company, for instance, it's a mechanism as well. It's a kind of self-sustaining, ideally, and that encourages growth. So we kind of implement those ideas, essentially almost like autophagy, to our day-to-day things, in terms of life, sort of organization, etc., around us. So it's a concept actually makes a lot of sense. And Dr. Jason Fung also mentioned about loose skin, which blew my mind, because I always associate people, particularly when you have a lot of weight to lose, loose skin is kind of inevitable. But according to him, he never referred to any any patient that lost a lot of weight to skin to having to have skin removal, which is pretty amazing. I thought, because by introducing some form of fasting, essentially allowing the body to use up the redundant protein, I think it's pretty amazing. Let's move forward.
Yeah, right. And it's not that fasting is bad, it's that you're not applying the knowledge that we have to your situation, right?
Context
so we get
is...
exactly. So if you're 400 pounds and type 2 diabetic, yeah, maybe a long fast is good for you. If you're 150 pounds and all muscle and you're worried about performance athletics, that 5-day fast is not necessarily good for you, right? Because you don't have a lot of fat, you're going to burn more protein proportionally, and maybe you don't have all that much excess protein anyway, right? So yeah, maybe not the best idea. So there's a lot of context in this, right? And it's like anything else, right? It's like running. Do we ever say, oh, I went out, I ran a marathon, I didn't do any training, but I ran a marathon and I just about died, right? It's like, well, that was stupid, right? That's what we tell them, right? We don't say, oh, running's so bad for you, right? But we do that in fasting. Some guy says, I'm going to do a 30-day fast, water only. I'm like, and you're like 110 pounds. And then it's like, oh, he almost died. I'm like, well, that's because he was stupid, right? Not because the fasting was bad. You got to take it in context. It's a therapeutic tool. That means you can use it or not use it, right? You got to know where to use it and apply the knowledge. And this is the thing, right? It's we get to this point of hysteria where we just look at it and say, oh, fasting's so bad for you, right? There's so much inherent bias against it.
Yeah, what I've heard is that it lowers glutathione and it burns muscle. Those are the two big ones that I've heard quite a bit. But I want to go back a little bit. There's a lot of things that we just want to catch everyone up, make sure we're all on the same speed. You said you fast 3 days a week periodically. What does that look like?
So I typically do 24-hour fast. So the thing is about fasting is that there really is any duration you want to do, right? So you can do longer ones. You can do, so Jimmy Moore did a 21-day fast, for example. And you can do kind of 16-8, which is a 16-hour fast every day, which is also a very good thing. Our number one rule is to fit it into your lifestyle to where you get the results that you want, right? So that's probably our number one rule. So if you are very obese and type 2 diabetic, well, maybe you'll have to adjust your life a little bit to fit this in, right? Because you're not getting the results that you want. But otherwise, if you're getting good results, then there's no reason to change. So you don't want to change your life to fit the fasting necessarily, unless there's health concerns, because it's hard in that you're not going to be able to sustain it because that's not your regular life. But for me, this is what works well. I do a 24-hour fast, which means I don't eat breakfast, I don't eat lunch. So I go dinner to dinner. It's a 24-hour fast. If you want to be technical, maybe it's a 23-hour fast, right? But either way, it's most of the 24 hours I'm fasting. And I'll do that 2 to 4 times a week. And it all depends on the week, right? Some weeks I have lunch plans, right? And therefore I'll eat lunch. If that week I don't, then I won't, right? So that's basically it, right? So I have no idea. Some weeks are very good and some weeks are very bad, right? So it really fluctuates up and down depending on how busy I am. So that's really all it is, right? But what I do is I fit that into my life, and it doesn't interrupt my life in any way, right? So today, for example, I'm doing this, so I won't eat lunch. That means I can go to the hospital and get my work done on time, because normally I would go to lunch. I mean, not that I do that much anymore anyway, but normally I would take out 45 minutes and go to lunch, or if I had lunch plans, I would do, a lunch meeting or whatever, right? That would take that time. But now I kind of go in and I'm at the same point, so I can go home on time, even though I've done something over lunch, right? But I haven't needed to take the time, right? So this is the thing. You got to fit that into your life, and nobody even knows, right? It's like it fits seamlessly in. So that's why I do it.
Yeah.
Do I do longer ones? Occasionally, not very often, because I tend to have dinner with my family most nights. So it would be very disruptive for me to be sitting there and not eating while everybody else is eating, right?
Yeah.
Now, they know I talk about it all the time, obviously. So if I were to say, oh, I'll sit down with you, but I won't eat. But again, it's a social thing. You're there, with your family. It's dinner time. You talk and you eat. And that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
So this is really important for me when I was watching this content for the first time as well, is the flexibility of it, because particularly when people kind of taking interest in this field, a lot of times we become very militant about it. For instance, fasting, they go into a lot of time. I see debate of going to the definition of fasting. If you just, taking a teaspoon of olive oil, you're no longer fasting. The whole thing is off. So you can see that, what I love about Dr. Jason Fung's attitude is that, which is my own philosophy as well, is making it work, making it last. Because if it doesn't last, it doesn't matter what you do for 6 weeks or 6 months. Eventually, you're going to come back to day one, square one. So it's about knowing what you're trying to do, the direction you're heading to, but ultimately give yourself a lot of flexibility, particularly if you have family, you have kids, that you cook for multiple people. And that is not just fasting. That's basically my approach to keto overall, is that if it's, whatever I choose to moderate my life, diet-wise, or the way I eat, if I cannot do it every day, pretty much I don't want to do it, or I try to modify so I know that I can move forward. I mean, I talked about this before. I'm claustrophobic. I genuinely have claustrophobia, but mentally I'm claustrophobic as well. So if you give me an idea and go, Fan, you have to do this for eternity, otherwise everything breaks, I pretty much will not do it, because I know I'll fail. I'll run myself into sort of dead end and corners. And that's quite a lot of people do. They will charge forward. There's nothing wrong with that. When we make changes, it's an instant, and you do that, and you want to do everything, right? There's just a human tendency. I do that. But when you do that in the process, just be honest with yourself and be frank, is that how much I can genuinely, I can realistically do this in the longer term. And if not, then modify it. And sometimes you slip, so what? Just get back. So this is really important concept as well.
Yeah. So for me, it would be disruptive to do a lot more than that. So I don't. Right?
Plus, I mean, you're very lean. You don't look like you need to lose much weight. You're just going after the anti-aging benefits of this.
It helps me maintain my weight. Honestly, I do it more because it gives me a lot more time to do stuff. But it also, not just that, but I mean, there's other benefits. But some of them, like the autophagy and stuff, you probably have to go a bit longer, right? But I don't have any specific reason to go longer. Right. I'm where I want to be in terms of my weight, and I'm not diabetic. So there's no reason for me to do longer. Right. Other than if I was, really just for the challenge of it, that'd be about it. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't feel particularly compelled to do that. So
yeah, me neither. I do like the 24-hour fast periodically. I've been doing like once a week after reading your book and hearing you talk about that. Let's talk about the anti-aging properties. A lot of people are spending a lot of their discretionary income on Botox and liposuction, whatever, trying to slow down the aging process. And you mentioned that when you go into this, when you're fasting, you increase growth hormone and other anti-aging hormones, get rid of the junk you don't need. What have you seen? I mean, this can be anecdotal too, Dr. Fung, from your patients, like skin tightening. Do they look younger? I personally have noticed that with people that do intermittent fast.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because a lot of these sort of things are, the skin, for example, is protein. So therefore, you can have differences in the skin that come around with intermittent fasting. So some people have noticed it, definitely. I mean, Jimmy Moore was talking about this, some of his skin tags popped off and so on. And, when I look at his, that's a fairly extended fast, so it gives you a good idea.
I don't know
when
who
you
Jimmy
look
Moore
at
is.
him, or the other day when he finished the 21 days, it's like, wow, he looks really good.
Yeah.
That's what I thought the other day. He just looks very healthy. Obviously, he has more weight to lose that he'd like to lose. Sure, so does everybody, right? But he just looked like he had that kind of vitality, right? And it's not all about weight, right? You can be all, thin and still not look, healthy. So definitely what happens during the process of fasting is that you get rid of all the kind of old old cells, which is the autophagy. And it's whenever you want to renovate, for example, a house, you actually have to tear down all that old stuff first, right? So what you do if you have kitchen cabinets you want to renovate, you got to tear all the old ones down, then you put up new ones, right? You can't simply put up new ones, and that's kind of our mistake, is that we think that, oh, everything's good, but you can't build a new cabinet on top of an old one, right? You got to tear it down. That's what the fasting does, right? It tears down all the old stuff. Then when you do eat again, then you'll build new stuff, right? And that's a lot healthier. It's a lot better for you than just trying to add on, right? And that's one of the kind of secrets. And it's obvious, it's intuitive when you think about it, but most people don't really think that deeply. So they always think, oh, more protein is better. More protein is better. Let's just keep doing this with the protein.
Yeah, really interesting. I love that analogy. It makes a lot of sense intuitively, like you said, and to kind of get rid of the weaker cells. Let's talk about autophagy. So this is a hot topic in the anti-aging community as well. And I heard you say, I actually got this question. I did a kind of a lunch and learn yesterday for some integrative naturopathic type doctors. And one of the questions came up about, so autophagy, it takes they were asking, is it 36 hours, 48 hours? I haven't looked at that particular research.
It actually depends on mammalian target of rapamycin. That's one of the big, which is called mtor. So mtor is a major regulator of autophagy, and it's actually protein that is the big turnoff, right? So what happens is that mtor is essentially a nutrient sensor. It kind of senses how much nutrients are coming in. So if you have a little bit of protein, it actually kind of senses that very, very quickly. And the mTOR is what turns on and off autophagy. So you could be fasting. And so if one of the things we use is bone broth, and it has a lot of protein. If you want autophagy, then it may be best not to use it, because you may turn off that kind of autophagy. So you, on the other hand, theoretically, and there's not a lot of research into this, right? But theoretically, you could eat pure fat and still get autophagy, right? So if you ate 0 carbs, because again, it's not the calories, it's not a calorie sensor, it's a protein sensor. So it's very interesting that if you eat pure fats, so some people do this, right? Fat
MCTs
fast and MCTs or bulletproof coffee or whatever it is, you could actually, theoretically, not fast at all. You could be taking hundreds and hundreds of calories, right, with bulletproof coffee a couple times a day, right? You could easily get 1,500 calories if you take a couple of cups of that, right? But you could get almost all the benefits, right? So that's very interesting. Now, there's not a lot, but in terms of length, you're probably so it could be 0, right, as long as you're kind of avoiding all the protein. If you are taking protein, you could be doing this kind of bone broth fasting and never get autophagy, right? So, but if you're doing kind of...
I just want to pause quickly. So, it's so interesting, this bit, because he's saying, so fasting we're associated with not eating, but he's saying that depends on why you're fasting. So there are different things, different benefits for fasting. But if you're doing it to trigger autophagy, so he mentioned this term mTOR, which is a protein sensor. So if, in theory, if it's a protein sensor to switch autophagy on or off, technically, as long as you don't take in protein, it should turn on the autophagy. So he's saying that in theory, and he says there's no study done at this point, but technically you can take in a lot of fat. And he mentioned bulletproof coffee, which is you use MCT or some sort of butter or coconut oil that people use to blend with coffee, and that is pretty much pure fat because there's no calories in coffee. So if you do that, then technically you could be taking some calories, but it will not prevent autophagy to happen. That is pretty interesting. So people fast for different reasons, and this is what triggers autophagy.
A bone broth fasting and never get autophagy, right? So, but if you're doing kind of classic water only fast, my guess is somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. My guess is also that it depends a little bit on your underlying state. So if you have a lot of, kind of underlying protein, then you're going to get rid of it, right? But if you don't, then you're not, right? So again, if you take those, say, Holocaust survivors, right, it's not a good idea to turn on autophagy, right?
Right.
Those guys have nothing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you have to kind of take that into account too. So for regular people, assuming you're doing kind of classic water only, I'd say somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. Again, because of the glycogen stores and so on. Obviously, if you're in a kind of low carb state already, it may not take that long because you're kind of in that kind of pre-ketosis state kind of thing.
Yeah. Two things come up with that I think people are interested. What's the link between, so elevated levels of mTOR drive autophagy? Is that kind of the signaling molecule that triggers that, or is it the opposite?
I think it's the opposite. I think it's a negative regulator.
I see.
Yeah, so it goes. So I think it senses protein as the main thing mTOR is, and then I think when mTOR goes up, it goes down or something like that. Yeah.
So a lot of people are taking like branched chain amino acids while they're fasting, so that would negate the autophagy. Is where I was getting.
Yeah,
interesting. Thing. So
but certain ones are worse than others. So I haven't looked specifically then to which ones. I had written it down, but honestly, I can't remember. It's not important, but there are certain ones that are more important for mTOR than others. I don't remember if it was the branch chain ones, but it's the same thing, right? Bone broth, which is relatively healthy, and branched chain amino acids and stuff. Yeah, you could lose some of the benefits from that. And again, to me, it's like, well, if you're going to do it and you're worried about it, then do classic water only. When you eat, take your branched chain amino acids, right? What's wrong with that? Take it when you eat, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't take it, but when you're doing your fasting, then just do the fasting, right? Don't try and mix up the two. And the same thing with the bone broth, which is, again, a fairly healthy thing. If you want to do that, you can change the schedule so that you take the bone broth when you eat, right? So you get the benefits. There's all these other kind of traditional benefits of bone broth.
Yeah.
We use it to increase compliance, truthfully. So people feel like it's easy.
Did you hear what he just said? So he talks about Dr. Jason Fung just talked about the bone broth, and he used the term compliance. He used that for compliance to get people to keep it going, and I love that, because a lot of people probably would argue that if you give someone who is fasting bone broth that contains calories, then it's no longer a fast. But if you have a flexible mind, you go, well, is it more important to strictly stay in the sort of textbook fasting state, or giving patients some way to navigate their way through to for them to sustain what they're trying to do there. So I love that about him, and I'm just so amused they use the word compliance, because as he mentioned, he treats a lot of people who are slightly older and they've probably never been fasted before, and so it's a little bit of incentive for them to keep going, and I just love the approach.
The other reason we use it in more extended fast, because then you can put some salt in. It's easier to get salt. Yeah. So if you do water only, you're getting very little salt, which sometimes causes people to get a bit dizzy and sometimes causes some headaches and stuff. So other people have done salt and water, which sounds super gross, but apparently when you're salt depleted, it tastes pretty good.
That is funny.
So for that, we say, well, then use a broth or a vegetable broth for those vegetarians, because then you can put a lot of salt in, and then you won't get those sort of symptoms. So it increases compliance because it makes it easier. You still get most of the benefits of the fasting. It's not a true fast, but you get most of it, right? So I'm not big on saying that, you have to do it because then technically it's not a fast. I only care about results, right? How you get there, makes no difference to me. If you do a standard diet and get to where you want to go, then hey, who am I to tell you not to do what you're doing, right? Right. But if you want to change, it's because whatever you're doing is not working. Then I'll show you what I think is the best way, right? And then you try it and see if it works.
Yeah, and so those recommendations, how specific are they in terms of weaving in the bone broth or the salt? Is it after day 2 or 3, or just when you feel a little hunger?
No, we usually have people use it just whenever they feel like it.
Mhm.
And then if people don't do well, then we simply tell them to cut it out.
Okay.
But we have older patients, so typically we will stick to shorter fast durations. So again, this is that kind of context. If you're trying to treat like 75-year-olds, which I am,
Mhm.
then you probably shouldn't be so aggressive, because then somebody could get hurt, right? So we shy away from like a 30-day fast, right? But if you're like looking for a challenge and you're 400 pounds and you're 40 years old and you're pre-diabetic, well, you probably could do an extended fast as long as you're kind of monitor yourself. You got family around you and stuff, right? Sure, go ahead, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but there is a context. You got to use it where you think it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. And as a nephrologist, what have you seen in terms of restoration in kidney function through fasting in these elderly folks?
There's very little.
Okay.
See, I had hoped that people would get better, but in truth, they don't. The kidney disease, once the damage is done, is almost irreversible. So there are a few people who have reversed some of the mild parts of kidney disease, but fewer than I would have liked. And the truth is that kidney damage takes many decades. And even making them better, you can't reverse that damage. It's like if you have a car and you don't change the oil, then it breaks down. You go, oh, now I'm going to change the oil. Well, it's still broken down, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you change it now, right? You have to prevent the damage. It actually goes for a lot of organ systems. The organ is very good at repairing damage, but when that damage happens, it's very rarely reversible. Chronic damage, anyway. So you have to prevent it.
Yeah, which is the whole point of this podcast, is preventative medicine, so people don't have to worry about that so much. One thing that's come up is hormone issues, like low testosterone. We know that, low hormones, low androgens in men precipitates insulin resistance and obesity and so forth. So what have you seen as a practitioner in men, like hypogonadism? Have you seen testosterone increase with fasting?
There's not much of a difference. So we get this question with women in fasting a lot too.
Yeah.
So the main hormone that's affected in terms of fasting is insulin, because that's really the main hormone involved in energy metabolism, energy regulation. And some people say, well, about the thyroid? I'm like, there's maybe minor effects, but nothing major. We've put hundreds of people on, and we haven't seen a lot of thyroid disease. Some people will have thyroid disease anyway.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to precipitate it, because it has nothing to do with thyroid. And it's the same with the testosterone. It's the same with the sex hormones, estrogen. So it doesn't make it better, and it doesn't really make it worse. So there are certain issues like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which are actually part of the metabolic syndrome, which do get better. But for the most part, it's no difference. And that's why some people say, oh, women shouldn't fast. I'm like, well, where do you get that from, right? And it's always the same studies of 5 rats that somebody pointed out at one point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ridiculous, because, women have fasted for thousands of years, right? Literally millions of women today fast, right? All the Muslims, all the Christians, right? Muslims doing Ramadan. We just passed Yom Kippur, and it's a day of fasting. During Lent, millions of women fast, right? So literally hundreds of millions of women fast at some point during the year. So if they're going to have problems, like, don't you think we would have heard about them, right?
Yeah.
And if we heard about them, then somebody would have said, maybe the Prophet Muhammad or Jesus Christ or Buddha would have said, well, look at all these problems women are having with fasting. We shouldn't do it, right? Because otherwise we're going to kill them all, right? Or if you're going to, but again, it's all context, right? So there are women who shouldn't fast. Pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and if you're underweight, because if you're underweight and you have no fat, you shouldn't be fasting, man or woman, but the women are going to lose their periods, right? So yeah, they shouldn't be fasting. That's just common sense, right?
Yeah.
But we turn around and blame the fasting when it's like, well, you should blame your own stupidity, because if you are seriously underweight, then fasting is a super bad idea, right? You see the same kind of hysteria around anorexia.
I just want to say, because in the last live stream, I actually talked about my approach to fasting or not fasting. I was asked that. So I sort of naturally fall into my eating pattern, fall into some sort of intermittent fasting, but I never attempted sort of anything more than 24 hours. And it's because my body just screaming and kicking and not wanting to do it. So I think it was 1 year after I started eating sort of keto way of sort of, ketogenic way. And I was looking to a lot of material with autophagy, sort of intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting. And I did try my body. So I was maybe slightly underweight at that time. So, this goes back to your body will tell you what is correct, what is the good thing to do. Even though I was totally buying to sort of, doing slightly longer sort of fasting, my body just refused to do it. By the 22nd hour every day, my body was just going, no, you have to eat something. And I'm glad that I trusted it and respecting my body's wishes rather than go, well, fasting is really good, I must do a 2-day fasting or anything like that. So it's really, we're made differently, and we're in different stages of our lives, and you really need to listen to your body. So it's not one idea fits all. It never is, because we wouldn't be here. If reduced calorie diet might be working for some people, maybe low fat even works for some people, but clearly it doesn't work for everybody. So we're looking for different solutions. And, a lot of people put fasting as one thing that you have to practice a certain way. You don't. You absolutely don't. You have to listen to your body, or you're going to get best scenario, you just get fed up and give up, or you can do some damage to your body. So if you Dr. Jason Fung mentioned about body weight, it's kind of true. If you don't have a lot to lose, it probably puts on more burden to your body when you're going to some sort of fasting. Maybe some yogi in the mountain, they're very slim, they still manage to fast for, I don't know, a month, but it's not for everybody. So, you need to respect what your body is telling you.
Nervosa.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
ironic
back
actually,
a little
because
bit.
when you talk about fast, serious thing, when it's like, well, you should blame your own stupidity because you shouldn't be fasting, man or woman, but the women are going to lose their periods, right? So yeah, they shouldn't be fasting. That's just common sense, right?
Yeah.
But we turn around and blame the fasting when it's like, well, you should blame your own stupidity because if you are seriously underweight, then fasting is a super bad idea, right? You see the same kind of hysteria around anorexia nervosa.
Yeah.
Oh, it's ironic actually, because when you talk about fasting, the first thing people say after they roll their eyes is they say, nobody's going to do that. And then you say, oh, well, I have hundreds of people who do that. And then shortly thereafter, then you're going to give them all anorexia. I'm like, okay, first you thought nobody would do that. Now you think they're going to love it so much that they won't stop doing that, right? It's like, come on, you can't have it both ways. And it's always funny because it's like, okay, first of all, anorexia nervosa is a psychiatric disorder of body image, right? So it's not simply that you're not eating, it's because your mental state is disturbed so that you think you're seriously overweight when you're not. That's not what fasting is, right? So it's like saying, oh, you shouldn't wash your hands, you're going to get obsessive compulsive disorder. It's like, okay, that's dumb, right? And it's the same thing. The second thing is that it's not that much fun, right? It's not like I'm going to get hooked on it like cocaine, right? I mean, I've treated hundreds of people. It's a challenge to get them to do it, right? Even when they have a lot of motivation to do it. Anorexia is almost the last thing on my mind. But again, here's the context. If you're a 60-year-old woman who is 250 pounds, type 2 diabetes, you need to lose that weight, anorexia is not my concern anywhere in the top 1,000 medical problems that could come up, right? So don't talk to me about I'm going to give them anorexia. Nobody in that patient profile is going to develop anorexia nervosa. In fact, many of them won't do it because they just don't want to, right? If it's an 18-year-old model from New York who has a body mass index of 16, yeah, I wouldn't do fasting for her, but that's just common sense, right? So this is the whole thing. Anorexia nervosa is a serious problem, but fasting, which is only the symptom, is only part of it, right? It's not the disease, right? It's only what they do because they have this disease. But it doesn't mean that you should throw it out as a therapeutic option for everybody. So in terms of hormones, thyroid hormone and sex hormones and all these other hormones, they're really not that affected that much.
Interesting.
We're really talking about the insulin and the counter-regulatory hormones. Cortisol is a question, though, because it does go up. Right? Cortisol does go up. It's part of the counter-regulatory hormones. So if you have problems with high stress levels, increased cortisol, remember, fasting is a stress to the body, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that stress the body that are good, right? There's also bad things too. But exercise is a stress to the body too, right? You stress the body, and the body responds by getting stronger. Fasting is much the same. It's also a stress to the body. It can go overboard, right? So again, you have to know what you're doing. But for the most part, I mean, humans have been doing it for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
If you start fasting, you feel really bad and you think your cortisol levels, for whatever reason, are sky high and you can't deal with it, then it maybe not for you, or maybe you need to shorten it, or maybe you need to change, or you maybe need to alter it some way. Because there's
So this reminds me of a question I was asked maybe only a few days ago. Someone asked me whether being on keto increases the cortisol level, which is the fight and flight, fight or flight hormone, the adrenaline, but the question was put in a way in the context of being on keto and ketosis, which what the doctor is saying here is the fasting. So in regards of the keto part of it, if you're just eating a regular keto diet, I only have my own body to refer to, my own experience. So for me, I replied a quick answer, but my answer is basically makes me a lot more relaxed because it kind of takes a lot of my food issues and my anxiety over food or whatever guilt trip, whatever away. So I'm a lot more relaxed when it's around food. But what the doctor is talking about is the fasting specific, and it would go up. But he also mentioned about exercising, which is utterly true, that when the whole concept of exercising is stressing your body to a certain extent in a control method. And similar to fasting, really, you are doing it in a way that you're not ultimately deprived of nutrient forever, but you're doing within a certain time frame and with your own body. So the kind of cortisol, but if you have some sort of underlying condition with high anxiety, perhaps you need to tone the fasting weight down. But otherwise, it could be a positive force, really. It gives you higher level of energy.
Infinite flexibility. The other hormone that does go up, of course, is noradrenaline. So you do get more energy and you don't get that basal metabolic rate decrease that you get with caloric restriction, which is the key to weight loss, right? It also sometimes causes sleep disturbances, and it's because they're so full of energy that they actually can't sleep or wake up and can't go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And I tell them, then don't. Go do something.
Read a book.
Do some work, whatever you want, because your body is telling you, you don't need to go to sleep, right? You've got lots of energy. And the thing is that's okay. You're listening to your body. But getting back to the basal metabolic rate decrease, actually, that is the most important part of weight loss. Losing weight is never a problem, right? Every single diet, you can lose weight. For 6 months, you can lose weight. The problem is almost all diets, they go back up, right? And the problem is that as you lose weight, your basal metabolic rate will go down, So you're burning less calories. And then that weight plateaus and then it goes back up. And it happens for almost all diets. And it's interesting because we've known about it for like 100 years. But what doesn't decrease your basal metabolic rate is fasting. Okay. So that is a huge advantage in weight loss because that means you can keep that weight off.
Right.
So
That's big.
it's huge. So if you compare, for example, this recent study that I was telling you about where they compared daily caloric reduction to alternate daily fasting, you can see that the caloric reduction decreased their basal metabolic rate by about 80 calories a day, which was statistically significant, whereas the fasting one decreased it by about 29, which was not statistically significant, right? P value of like 0.48 or something like that, right?
Okay.
So in other words, what that tells you is that caloric reduction reduces your basal metabolic rate. Fasting does not, right? Huge advantage. It's like almost impossible to emphasize that enough because that is the one problem that always occurs with weight loss. It's the weight regain, weight plateau. Forget about the weight loss. Everybody can lose weight on almost any diet, right? That's why the 6-month results are always great. It's the BMR, right? The BMR. The other one is the hunger, of course, but
what I think is interesting about that particular study that you're talking about is, if you look at the end of 1 week, I would imagine the calorie intake is pretty equivalent. Would you say? Or it's
for which one?
Between both the intermittent fasting group or the alternate day fasting versus
there's 2 studies actually. So one of them actually controlled for calories, which is very interesting because they controlled for calories. So intermittent fasting versus caloric reduction, same number of calories, same weight loss at the end of 6 months, right? But that's not the key. The key is the long term, right? And unfortunately, they didn't go past 6 months. But what you found was that the insulin resistance was much better with the fasting group, and the insulin level was much better. So again, a reflection of the insulin resistance.
Yeah.
The other study was actually not calorically matched. So the fasting people were eating less calories than the caloric reduction people, yet did not reduce their metabolic rate, right?
Powerful.
Very, very powerful. Like it's so important. That part is like so important because that is the key. Like, I don't know why nobody else talks about it because that is, we know that, right? All those studies, for example, that recently came out about the Biggest Loser studies, right? So that got a lot of press. Rightfully so. They're good studies, right? But what they pointed out.
Let me quickly pause here. So his doctors was talking about the basal metabolism or whatever it is. It's basically plainly is the how many calories your body burns is the metabolism really that we normally refer to is like how many calories you burn during an hour or whatever it is. So what happens is when you like we've all done low calorie diet, and he's about to talk about the Biggest Loser study. So if you have seen that program, it's basically about a group of people who have weight issues, they're overweight, and they send to this place like boot camp, and they get controlled diets, they exercise a lot. And then at the end, I don't know what period, they get weigh in, and in the end, there's a person that loses most weight that wins. Whatever you think about that study, about that program, is basically most of them lose a lot of weight. Okay, but the study, the doctor is about to talk, the interview is going to get into is what happens afterwards, and this is the key. I think no one would disagree that if you sort of go into some sort of diet, everybody can lose weight, but it's what happens afterwards. So with calorie reduced diet is as your body mass reduces, the rate that you burn calories also reduces. It makes perfect sense because it's proportional to how much weight you carry. So the issue with calorie restriction diet is you will get to a point, we call it plateau, it probably happens to other forms of diet as well, is when you can no longer lose weight. So in order for you to lose weight in a calorie restriction diet, you have to keep reducing it in order to get body to lose more weight. But it's not sustainable, because at some point that you can't go any lower and you can't exercise more. You know, you only have so much time and you still need nutrient for your body. So you hit that point where your body just go, I can't do it anymore. And that's when everything bounces back. You need to start increasing the calories you take in, and that's when the weight comes back. So because your body, basically cannot sustain that kind of continuous reduction of calories. And that's why low calorie or any form of diet that, eventually reducing the calories, that alone does not work. It makes perfect sense.
Was that the reason why practically nobody, could keep that weight off was the decrease in basal metabolic rate. Yeah. Except for, I think there was one person, and it is very interesting because the other person had bariatric surgery, which is, another form of very severe caloric restriction, right? What happened to his metabolic rate was it went back up. I'm like, wow, fascinating.
Yeah, very interesting. So really, I mean, if we can kind of summarize the intermittent fasting or alternate day fasting as a kind of a protocol people want to embark on, how is it different than calorie restriction? Is it probably is affecting signaling molecules throughout the body in a different way than just cutting your calories isn't, epigenetically or vice versa?
Yeah. See, the thing is that everybody tries to pretend like it's all about calories, but you've got to get out of that mindset, because the calories really has nothing to do with it. Fasting is about time not eating, right? It has nothing to say about calories. The calories is 0, right? But it's really about the time that you don't eat. It's about changing your hormones, changing your insulin, changing your growth hormone, changing all that, right? It has nothing to do with calories, right? So everybody says, well, fasting works because it reduces calories. Well, no, because you can compare the two and you'll see that there are differences. So it's not all about the calories. It's the same thing. If you say it's all the same, well, you could say, well, it should be the same if you jump off a 1-foot wall 100 times or if you jump off a 100-foot wall once. It's the same. It's all about the foot to the feet, right? It's 100 feet. Exactly. And I'm like, oh, except that one you die and one of them you don't, right? That's a huge difference. It's the same thing. So fasting,
as it is,
even if it was the same calories, is not the same. The hormonal changes are not the same. And that's the point of the obesity code, is that it's not a caloric imbalance. It's a hormonal imbalance, right? So cutting calories does not fix that hormonal imbalance, right? Fasting to some degree helps it much better, right? And there are other things. You have to change the diet, maybe stress, maybe sleep. There's all kinds of things to do with obesity that have to be changed in order for you to fix it.
Yeah.
Of which one is fasting. It's not everything, right? Some people, it's stress, it's cortisol, right? So some people have chronic pain syndromes and stuff. I'm like, well, your cortisol is like through the roof, right? Fasting is not going to help you at all, right? It's going to shoot it up even more, right? And you shouldn't do it, right? So you have to kind of understand that. But the problem is that we've got to the point where we just kind of poo-poo it for everybody, right? It's also not a cure-all for everybody, too.
Yeah. Now, the cortisol, are you testing that serum? Is that what you're seeing, or you just hear that?
We don't test it. I mean, we have looked at studies of people who test it. I mean, we're not a research lab or anything, so we don't test it. It's not easily available. None of the hormones are easily available because hormones in general are pulsatile, so you can't actually measure it easily. You can do things like 24-hour urinary cortisol, but they're hard to do, and in the end, we just make our clinical judgment.
Yeah, and just tell people. I mean, my personal experience with fasting, I don't get that like fight or flight response that you get in traffic, but you definitely feel more energized. That's an N of one, but some people, and so I think this is a lifestyle shift, and so meditation and heart math and doing mindful-based therapies is part of the equation for people.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you can incorporate it, and that's really the key, right? You could do once a year a long fast, right? Some people recommend that for sure. You could do short daily fast, 16-8, right? Every day you eat within an 8-hour window. And remember this, in the 50s, for example, there's very little obesity. People are eating white bread, right? Jam. right? Cookies, ice cream, right? There's no whole wheat bread, or if there was, nobody ate it, right? I know I grew up in the 70s. Nobody ate whole wheat bread ever, right? There was no whole wheat pasta, right? Everybody ate regular pasta. But the key was there was no snacking either, right? So what happened is that you ate within usually a 10-hour window, right? You had breakfast at 8, you had dinner at 6. And everything outside of that, there's no snacks. You didn't eat in the car. You didn't eat at the theater. You didn't eat anywhere else except at a table, right?
With family or coworkers.
With family or whatever, right? You're not eating at your desk. You're not eating in front of the computer. You're not doing any of these things where you're eating but doing something else. This kind of mindless eating sort of thing, right? So what that means is that you've got a 10-hour eating window. You've got a 14-hour everyday fast, right? And guess what? There's no obesity, but they're eating white bread and jam like crazy every day. I pack the sandwich with white bread every day, right?
This reminded me I remember if you go on YouTube and look for footages from maybe in the 50s, 60s, or even 70s, there are a lot of sort of video specialists. They do enhance sort of pictures, turning black and white footages into color footages. They look really, really good. And I remember seeing a clip of Piccadilly Circus, which is a central part of London. I live in London, in the UK. And so in Europe in general, the buildings are preserved because of the historical value of them. So the square looked very, very similar to the way it is today. The signs are different and people dress in different clothes, obviously. I think the clip I saw was in the 60s. And I remember watching that and thought, there was crowds of people moving around. And I was thinking, there isn't one single person look remotely overweight. It's weird because now you walk on, you go to High Street, there are people in all shapes and sizes. But if you watch the footage, which is not a selected crowd, it's not like, in a fashion event or anything, they're just random people coming to the town center, the city center. Literally no one was remotely overweight. And this was the 60s. And Dr. Jason Fung was talking about the 50s. I don't know if it's true they never snacked. Maybe food just wasn't that ready. But the eating pattern, and he says something quite key, a key term is mindless eating. And we kind of tune into, get into the habit of doing something else while our eating. So eating is no longer the focus. And I think the habit of eating definitely has a lot to do with maybe coincide with the fast food chains that arrive. When did they arrive? McDonald's and stuff like that. Maybe sometime in the 80s, late 80s, something like that. And you do the math, it's not about just bashing some people can live on fast food and nothing happened to them. But, there's a correlation between these events from happening, the change of eating habit in terms of how we relate to food. We see it purely as a, fuel source to a certain extent and for quick comfort and pleasure, maybe because life becomes more stressful. So there's definite correlation there. And not even 50s. If you watch 60s or 70s footage, you would be, it would be a great challenge for you to find someone that remotely, even older people, you really don't see anyone's overweight. So this phenomena of weight issues happened in the last 3-4 decades. That's a very short period of time. And we need to look into what happened there. We're having so much,
to school,
so much trouble doing it. So just finding a diet that doesn't distress us.
Family or coworkers.
With family or whatever, right? You're not eating at your desk. You're not eating in front of the computer. You're not doing any of these things where you're eating but doing something else. This kind of mindless eating sort of thing, right? So what that means is that you've got a 10-hour eating window. You've got a 14-hour everyday fast, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? There's no obesity, but they're eating white bread and jam like crazy every
Cereal.
day.
Yeah.
I packed the sandwich with white bread every day, right?
Yeah.
To school. So it's like, that's crazy, because this is the thing. You can go back to that time where you kind of take those 3 meals a day, and lots of people at that time, like in France, for example, they'd have coffee in the morning and that's it. Nothing else.
Lots of
They
butter.
were really healthy, right? And even the word itself, break fast, right? It means you have to fast, because you can't break the fast if you're not fasting. It's a part of everyday life, and we lost that balance. And for some reason, we listen to real fools that keep telling us, oh, you got to eat the minute you roll out of bed. Like, if your feet hit the ground and you don't have like a cereal in your mouth, you're going to die, right? It's like, okay, you guys are idiots, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to eat right up until the time you go to bed. It has to be breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, and then another bedtime snack. It's like, that's supposed to lose weight? You're supposed to eat more to lose weight? Like, that doesn't even sound like it's going to work, right?
Right.
You have all these kind of, even doctors who kind of spout this tremendous nonsense. And it's like, okay, where's your trial to tell us that that's really useful advice? Because that advice sounds really dumb to me, right? And of course, they have none. But now it gets enshrined, it gets repeated enough, it gets enshrined into this kind of wisdom. It's like, is there any historical background to this? No, right? Nobody's ever done that before, and nobody's ever had this obesity crisis before. Well, they might be connected, right?
Yeah. Really
Eating all the time, obesity crisis, right? It's like, not that hard, right? They're eating Oreo cookies in the 50s, they're eating Kit Kats, right? Nobody cared that much, because they had that daily fast to kind of reset themselves. And if you tried to take a snack, it's like, there's no food to eat in the house, right? There's a cold pot roast leftover from dinner, right?
You had to actually cook it and prepare. Mom had,
exactly.
Really
It's
great
not
point.
it's not like there's stuff just lying around. But now we pretend like, oh yeah, we're gonna leave like granola bars around and stuff, sugary good granola bars, so that you can have a little snack at nighttime so you can lose weight. I'm like, oh my god, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I can't believe people actually tell you this stuff, right? It's insane.
Really insane. Really interesting. So let's go back a little bit to the bulletproof coffee situation, where some people are using like MCTs to kind of mirror the, what do we want to say, the metabolic phenotype of calorie restriction or of intermittent fasting by going into ketosis. Is there any problems that you see with that in your clients?
Not really. So if you understand the physiology, all the benefits of fasting, or many of the benefits of fasting, come from reducing insulin, right? Well, pure fat has almost no insulin effect. So if all you're consuming is pure fat, you're getting a lot of calories, but you're not getting a lot of insulin, right? So therefore, you're getting almost all the benefits of fasting. And guess what? That's, a lot of people have said that it's really helped them, and the fat keeps them full and makes the fasting easier. And I'm like, hey, if that works for you, then I'm good with that, right? Now, for other people, they find that it slows down their weight loss. And I said, well, then don't do it, right? But theoretically, from a physiologic standpoint, if the point of fasting is to lower insulin, and the fat fasting or the bulletproof coffee also lowers insulin, then yes, it's fine. So I actually think that there's a lot of good reasons to believe that that would work.
Yeah. And along those lines, a lot of the folks like Jung Rowe and other folks in the ketogenic diet space doing research in drug-resistant seizures and so forth have found that intermittent fasting and the ketogenic style of eating go hand in hand.
Oh,
and so there's a lot of the crossover there. So I think it's important that we're having this conversation.
Yeah. The ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting are really just along that same spectrum. They're actually close cousins, basically, because the ketogenic diet, by being ultra low carb, lowers insulin. If you compare fasting to a low carb diet, the low carb diet actually delivers 71% of the insulin lowering as fasting. Now, you can't get better than fasting, because you can't get lower than zero, right?
Yeah.
But it gets you most of the way there, this sort of ketogenic diet. So it actually is very, very effective. So a lot of the diseases of hyperinsulinemia, which is obesity, type 2 diabetes, can be treated very effectively with a ketogenic diet. So I have no problem. The other thing that most people have found is that if you're on a ketogenic diet, or if you're on a low carb diet, fasting is like really, really easy. And it's the same thing because your body's so adapted to fat metabolism, right? So after that first 2 weeks, your body's so used to burning fat. It makes no difference if it's burning fat like butter or fat like body fat. It's the same fat, right? So it just burns it. So if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And maybe the ketones maybe suppress the appetite, so you don't have to eat, right? So there's so many ways that they kind of go together that they're really, one is just kind of a ramped up version of the other one.
Yeah.
That's it, right? A lot of people worry about nutrition or nutrient density and so on. But again, you have to take it into context, right? It depends on what you're treating. So if you're worried about getting enough nutrients, okay, then yeah, you have to worry about nutrient density and all that. I typically treat people who are obese, so I'm not worried at all about nutrient density because they have way too much nutrients, right? So I don't care. So they can fast because I don't need them to get more nutrients. They have had enough nutrients, right?
So important point here, another key point here is fasting and ketogenic diet really come in hand. And I think a lot of people who have who are in keto fasting, when they're on keto, comparing to maybe they have tried in the past, try to fast on a non-keto diet, they can definitely notice a difference. The high fat that we're taking in when we're on keto is a satiety suppression. Well, I wouldn't call it suppression, but it kind of repairs our hunger signal, the satiety signal, because what I experienced prior to keto is the fact that I didn't know when I was full. I just did not know. I didn't know what it's supposed to feel like. And the only signal I got is when I'm very full. And by then it's too late. I know I've eaten probably more than my body needs, and I feel bloated, I feel guilty. So there's a physical and psychological, sort of guilt trips. Your body is suffering, and mentally you're suffering as well. And I think for some reason the fat repairs that, because it's by taking, so being low carb is one thing, but being high fat is also important, because it really, first of all, it gives you enough, it's a great source of nutrient, but also it really fixes the hunger signal for me. So in a way, and you don't have to go into full-on fasting in any shape or form to really enjoy the benefit. And that is such a great news, because you don't feel like you have to do, go into kind of intermittent fasting up to a certain hours, or go into like 3-day fast, or some people do 10 days. I don't know how they do that. My body doesn't want to do it. But you can enjoy, he pulled up the number of 70% of the benefits. So it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. I think, through keto way of eating, for me, naturally creates a pattern of intermittent fasting without me consciously doing it. Because you're not hungry. If you're not hungry, there's no reason to eat. And if you don't eat, you create that natural sort of interval of not eating, and your body has time, maybe not go into autophagy as such, because it requires longer period of time. But even if you don't eat or not having food intake for about 16 to 18 hours, your body has the opportunity to rest and repair. And a lot of things the body needs to do is interrupted by food that comes in, because that's the top priority your body will go to and digest. And digesting food takes a lot of energy out of us, of a human body. And you know that because when you eat a heavy meal, you know it. You feel tired. So all the energy is dedicated to digesting the food. The brain function takes a back seat. Other functions take the back seat, and definitely healing and repairing your body is way at the bottom of the list. So by creating that natural break, which is a lot easier to do when you're on keto, because of a lack of hunger, then you can just naturally, through day-to-day living and eating delicious food when you're hungry, only when you're hungry, then you're enjoying a lot of benefit. It really makes a lot of sense. And that's the beauty of these two concepts, even though the video is focusing on fasting, but it's totally applicable if you just on any form of ketogenic diet.
Right?
Yeah.
They don't need more nutrients. Why do they need more? Like, what nutrient are you talking about, right? Are they going to get like scurvy or something, right? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the thing. So if you're, on the other hand, kind of one of these performance athletes and you're looking to build muscle, so if you want to build muscle, you got to take more muscle because you got to deposit it to build muscle, then yeah, you better worry about getting enough protein.
Sure.
Right? If you're obese and trying to lose weight for health reasons, then you don't need to, right? So there's a difference, right? And you got to kind of keep that in mind all the time when you take what somebody says, because that's where everybody gets into trouble, right? Somebody takes what I say out of context, where I'm treating a 65-year-old diabetic woman, and they're like a 22-year-old
CrossFit athlete.
Exactly. I'm like, yeah, what I say doesn't apply to you, right? Whereas the ketogenic person who's taking super high protein because they're looking to build muscle, that doesn't apply to this 70-year-old man who weighs 350 pounds, right? He doesn't need more protein. He needs to break down some of that protein on his body before he starts taking more, right? So always keep that in mind, because we're talking at different things, and it all depends on what you want to do. If you want to build muscle, then you got to adjust it. If you want to lose weight, you got to adjust it. If you want to treat type 2 diabetes, you got to adjust what you're doing.
Yeah, really good. I love that context. It's everything. It's really important.
It's everything, yeah.
And so that encourages people need to think for themselves a little bit and do trials on themselves. Like, take this information and customize it a little bit to their own lifestyle and needs. And speaking of your own lifestyle and needs, Dr. Fung, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit. These are 3 final questions that we ask every guest on the podcast about your morning routine. So you've written 2 books. You have a busy practice here and then also in the hospital with kidney patients. I know your morning's pretty valuable, probably with family, but you stay up on research. You have a great blog and all that. So what does the first couple hours of your day look like?
Well, I don't eat breakfast, right? I usually just have a coffee. That's kind of Monday to Friday. Saturdays and Sundays, I usually will have breakfast because it's, again, kids family time, right?
Yeah.
And then usually I'm right into work. I drop off the kids and I'm right at work, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm either in the office or I'm in the hospital, depending on which day it is.
So when you do your creative time, writing, thinking, reading, staying up on research?
The writing, I write mostly, it's mostly like 1 blog post per week. That's about what I do. So I try to maintain that. It's not bad. The book itself, the books are kind of more compilations of the blog posts, but there's a lot of work to be done, taking them, organizing them,
so
editing them, so it flows properly, right? The blog posts, it's whatever I think interests me that week, right? So there is a lot of that that gets put together. I usually, again, when it gets busy, I do more fasting. I get a few extra hours, and it adds up, right? So, for example, I've been fairly busy the last few weeks, and I estimate that it's at least 3 to 4 times a week I've been fasting, kind of 24 hours. But again, I don't have to waste my time at breakfast. I don't have to waste my time at lunch. Not that it's a waste, but
sure,
it gives me time to do something else. So that's like what, an hour 15 every day.
It's a lot.
4 days is 5 hours a week. In a month, that's like 20 hours, right? It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And if you need the time, then it's good to be able to kind of use that when you need to. So that's where I kind of get a bit of extra time to do what I interests me and what I want to do, right? So that's kind of what I do, right? In the kind of down periods, it's more like twice a week, right?
Sure.
Everybody likes to eat, right?
Yeah.
So I go eat more, right, at lunchtime or whatever it is. But when I get really busy, then I probably do it less.
That's really awesome. I mean, because a lot of people complain, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to create time, is just, I mean, let's face it, eating, meal prep, driving to go get food, even healthy food like Whole Foods, you're sitting in traffic and driving around and waiting in line. So
yeah,
that's
it's not just the eating, but you got to remember it's the planning, the shopping, the cooking, then the eating, then the cleaning up, right? So it's the same at breakfast, right? It's like, it's not like shower and get out of here, right? And it's like the coffee, it doesn't take any time. You just hit the button, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really funny. So let's talk about your favorite herb, nutrient, botanical, or whole food substance. So your macronutrients are covered on a desert island. Vitamin D, omega-3s are covered. What other performance boosting substance or longevity promoting substance would you bring with you?
I don't know. I'm not really big into that. I mean, it's not my major, it's not really what I'm interested in, because I deal with mostly the opposite spectrum, in that I treat mostly excess, right? So people have over nutrients, right? So really cutting them down is the main thing. So other than a general multivitamin, I don't make many recommendations. The only thing that I use sometimes is the omega-3s. I find that it helps me with a bit of inflammation at times, like the joints and so on. So the other thing I use quite a bit of is Epsom salts, which are magnesium salts. So a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. Probably the one thing more than any of the other minerals and so on that we see people deficient in is magnesium. If you take magnesium by mouth, then it often doesn't get absorbed and it just runs out the other side, right? So what you do with Epsom salts, they're magnesium salts, you dump them in your bath, you stir it up, and then it soaks through your skin. So if you soak in it for half an hour, a lot of magnesium kind of soaks in through your skin. It's also very relaxing, right? You get the ones that have like some scents and stuff. And I think that that's maybe one of the, more important things to do once in a while, is to kind of take a bath, right? And I always tell this to my kids. It's like they go take a bath. I'm like, because you can compare the two. And
I just click on something. Hang on. And I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of the Epsom salt bath. Definitely recommend it.
So what you do with Epsom salts, they're magnesium salts. You dump them in your bath, you stir it up, and then it soaks through your skin. So if you soak in it for half an hour, a lot of magnesium kind of soaks in through your skin. It's also very relaxing, right? You get the ones that have like some scents and stuff. And I think that that's maybe one of the, more important things to do once in a while, is to kind of take a bath, right? And I always tell this to my kids. It's like they go take a bath. I'm like, everybody feels better after a bath, right? It's like that kind of thing you did when you were a kid, right? Nobody wants to go into the bath, but when you're in, there's something just relaxing about it, right? It's like the ocean. Everybody loves the ocean. There's just something about it, right? It's the salt on the sea. I think it's the same thing. So it's relaxing. And so you should do it every so often. It's cheap, right? It's just some water and some salt. That's it, right? It's not like I'm telling you to go to the Four Seasons in Maui or something like that, right? It's cheap. It's like $10, a big bag of salt, and run a bath. And it's actually, I think, does people a lot of good to do that every once in a while. Soak in it. It allows you to kind of ruminate on things, think about things. Because let's face it, when you're just driving around and shopping and doing errands and, getting birthday cards and taking your kids to this and that, there's not a lot of time to just kind of sit down and think. And sometimes that bath and the Epsom salts and a bit of that, the aromatherapy sort of idea, I think it's sometimes really helpful for people, like the cortisol. It's the cortisol story, right? It kind of takes it down a notch.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's a good delivery system systemically for that magnesium.
Yeah.
Interestingly, just as a side note, Dr. Fung, interviewed a lot of people that treat autism, and that was one of their therapies, in addition to like a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, was Epsom salt baths. A lot of parents reported great feedback with that. So after learning about that about a year ago, I started doing that a lot with my daughter. So it's a cool way to calm her down too. The kids don't even know. You just pour the magnesium in there, and they're goofing around the bathtub and having a good time. Little do they know they're getting all the magnesium, which is pretty cool.
Well, they have all these nice scents, so I do that for my children as well. One is kind of a teenager now, so he doesn't take baths, right? Yeah. But the other one still likes to take a bath sometimes, and he actually likes the scent of it. So then he loves to take it. He doesn't know anything about the magnesium either. I just throw it in because it's fruity or whatever. I get one whenever he wants, right? But it's that kind of scent. He likes that, and so he uses it, right?
Yeah, really great. Great point. So final question, if you were to bump shoulders with the future president of the US or prime minister of Canada, someone from the World Health Organization in an elevator, just had 30 seconds to share with them a health or lifestyle tip that you would want them to know to maybe influence policy around. What comes to mind, and what's the most important thing that they should know about?
Well, I think that we need to teach people about the therapeutic potential of fasting, because if you think about it, what we have here is a therapy that has the potential to change the entire health system of the whole world. Because most of what we do now is diabetes, high blood pressure, and all the downstream stuff, heart attacks, strokes, and all that. But you can take care of all of that for free, right? The only thing that you need to do is apply that knowledge, right? You don't need to put money in it. You already have all the dietitians, you have everybody there. But we need to spread the knowledge of how to do it, because hey, if you don't eat, you'll lose weight. And hey, if you lose weight, your diabetes will go away. And hey, if you don't have diabetes, you won't get diabetic kidney disease, right? So now you've been able to prevent all this disease, probably like 50% of the healthcare budgets of the US and Canada, for free, right? That's an amazing, amazing thing. So who wouldn't want to do that, right? I mean, that's why we have to do it, because it has so many benefits, but it has like real consequences for the patient. It's preventing diabetes, preventing amputations, preventing heart attacks, preventing strokes. From a society standpoint, it's saving a hell of a lot of money, right? And not only that, it's saving it the right way, which is by preventing people from getting sick. That's why we're using less, hospitals, right? And all that stuff.
And moreover, people can be more productive. They feel better in anti-anxiety and productivity in workplace, marketplace, being more friendly with your friends and family because you're in a better mood, I found. So love that tip. So as a final kind of parting ways here, I know you're big on social media, you have a great blog. If folks want to connect with you online, what's the best way they can do that?
They can go to my blog. It's www.intensivedietarymanagement.com. I'm also on dietdoctor.com, which is like a great resource for low-carb recipes, intermittent fasting. There's a subscription site for that where you get kind of extra material, but there's tons and tons of free material that's just tremendous stuff. So definitely either of those sites is great.
Cool. Dr. Fung, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Okay,
thanks so much.
Well, there you go. We made it. We got to the end. It's packed with information. It's just packed with information. I want to know your thoughts about what you've seen, whichever part you've seen. For me, this was kind of one of the definitive content that I came across when I went on this journey. And so much of that was kind of busting through a lot of myths that's it's been around for a long time and being held to be true, and to be able to be broken down in such a way that it was easy for someone like me to digest. I want things to be simple. I don't want to be a scientist or some sort of nutritional expert just to look after my body. So this video really helps. And there's another video on the same channel. Again, big thanks to High Intensity Health channel. They do a lot of really good content with a lot of thought leaders of this field. So if you have any question, we can spend some time. I want to know your thoughts. And let me just have a look. I owe so much of personal wellness to Dr. Jason Fung. I agree, because I think particularly if you're embarking on sort of this really drastically different way of eating comparing to the sort of mainstream way of eating, it's very daunting, because people around you will tell you that this is probably going to do a lot of damage to you. But in order to know that you're actually on the right path, you need information, clear information that you can understand and absorb to guide you through. And I think that's the beauty of Dr. Jason Fung. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but I would say, at least based on this interview, most of things make so much sense. It's down to kind of, ground level. Most people can understand. And Simrat, one day I'll learn how to pronounce your stage name. It has reinforced and encouraged me in my health journey. Absolutely. I think, I've been on keto for 6 years now, but I'm still learning every day. And even though I watched this particular video many times in the beginning of my journey, I hadn't watched it for a long time. And now watching it again, it reminded me so many things that, maybe I have forgotten, or, it's absolutely really, really helpful. And I think we all need that kind of reminder, sort of encouragement to know that things don't have to be complicated. And looking after our body can be very, very intuitive. And, your life doesn't have to be turned around. So just to summarize the things we touch upon from the beginning, a lot of this is kind of addressing a lot of myths like muscle loss. If you go on keto, you lose muscle, which it's not really true. And what is being explained is that if your body is deprived of a nutrient, first of all, it will go into your body fat for energy. It makes perfect sense. And we all like to lose body fat. I think so many things with exercise and diet. People get excited when you say, well, it's going to lose the body fat. We all love that. And for some reason, we just think that if we go into some sort of intermittent fasting, the first thing is going to go is protein. It doesn't make sense. So the doctor is saying that, of course, it wouldn't do that. The body would be very stupid if it does that. It goes to your saving account, which is where your fat is, and use that up before anything. I mean, ultimately, let's say if you trap in a mountain for a month, eventually, it will probably, it will hit a brick wall at some point and start to consume the muscle. But ordinary control fasting, it's just no reason your body would do that. So, and that's one myth. And also about calories as well. And this really kind of transformed what I think about calories. Every day I get asked about my recipe from the viewers going, how many calories this is. And it's, for me, it's a redundant idea. I know it's a very difficult concept for people to absorb, because we're, from day one, when we think about health, we think about low calories. By reducing the calories, everything will work out. And we all know it's not true. And we know it's not true because we're here. Because if it worked, there's no reason we need to find an alternative. So calorie doesn't work because in this video, it talks about the metabolism, the basal metabolism, which is how fast you burn off the energy. And that will gradually reduce as your body lose weight. But if your weight loss is based on reduction of calories, at some point you're going to hit the brick wall, because you can't reduce it so low that it's not sustainable. So eventually you have to increase, and that's when the rebound comes back. And we see that time and time again. They mentioned the Biggest Loser competition where people lose a lot of weight. And that bit, there was one bit, I don't think we watched very carefully, it was my fault, is when they talk about Biggest Loser, as an example, the study afterwards is pretty much every single participant gain weight back, and some even gain more weight than what they had when they were before the competition. And it's because the rebound effect, the body just cannot do it anymore. But they mentioned there was one exception, which is a person who had the weight loss surgery, basically having the stomach reduced so little that you can only take in very little food. And obviously that procedure is very controversial because it's a major surgery. And it's not something that one should consider under normal circumstances. But only that one person did not gain the weight back. And I think what they're trying to draw the inference from is that through that surgery, essentially the person is fasting to a certain extent because they cannot take in a lot of food. And also because they're forced not, because of the physical restriction, the person is physically not able to take in more calories than the person would like to, perhaps. So one way or the other, it's a combination of, it could be through calorie reduction because of physical restriction, but also maybe inadvertently, the person is going through some sort of fasting because of the difficulty or the restriction to eat. So it's extremely interesting. And at the end, they touch upon the absent bars, and I'll definitely recommend it. I love two guys talking about smelly bars. It was just so sweet. So Epsom bars, what I do is that I just buy they come in 500 grams or 1 kilo at a time, and I'll chuck in half a bag or sometimes the entire bag if I'm feeling extravagant, and just in the warm hot water and just soak in. And apparently, if you take supplement, magnesium is very hard for body to absorb. But through taking a bath and soaking your entire body, your skin is the biggest organ of your body. So basically, you allow your entire body to take in the minerals. So that's a really good tip as well. I definitely recommend it. So let me know what you think, either in the comments or in the chat. And thank you for watching this video with me. It's about sharing information. And the moment I thought about doing a live stream, I was thinking about doing this, because how do I, introduce the entire piece of content with my own thoughts? And live stream is a perfect medium. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you're here, either watch a certain portion or entire video, thank you for your company. And I hope to do this again. There are a lot of information that I really would like to share with you. So let me know what you think. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you and welcome. So thank you, everyone, for joining me today. Let me just have a look at the, there's a comment here by Lindy. I, like you, never feel hungry and feel full. Well past the point, that's helpful. Try to be forgiving, take it slowly, as I work to pay attention to become more attuned, less mindless. Absolutely. You summed it up so beautifully, because I think most people have any kind of weight issue would identify with that, with the satiety signal being broken. You literally just don't have that natural stop that, we should all have, where any creature, if you look out to the animal kingdom, you wouldn't be able to have one, be able to pinpoint one creature out there. Animals, insects, whatever it is that require to go on a diet, unless there's something very wrong with them. So it makes no sense that we don't have that naturally. So thank you so much, and totally agree. And vegan freedom. Thank you for watching, and also Paul as well. Very good fun, and very good you, Paul. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your appreciation. And it's a small step, and hopefully one step at a time, we're able to kind of help people around us. Let's not think about mass population, but one person at a time, we're able to address and rectify a lot of myths that's surrounding by us, kind of being held as true, and ultimately causing damage and hinder our paths to well-being. So thank you so much one more time, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time very soon. Thank you. Bye.